Hi, it's the M.L.M for the Soul channel. I do have a new topic for today. Before I begin, I just would like to say, may the words and expressions of my mouth and the thoughts and meditations of my heart find favor and acceptance before you, Hashem. And this is continuing with the Mesillas Yesharim, which is the way of the upright, or also called Path of the Just, from the Ramchal, Rav Moshe Chaim Utsato. And this is from the Art Scroll Yaf edition, and this is what the Sefer looks like if you've never seen it, just so you know. And I will have a link below to Art Scroll so you can check out also all they offer. So this is continuing with, and it's part 42. This is continuing with the chapter that's one of the longest chapters, I believe, in this Sefer. It's chapter 11 on the details of the trait of Nikios, which is defined as cleanliness here. And last time was finishing up the part that was discussing, if I could find it here, just give me 1 second, talking about the 3 categories of sin that result from temptation, and the first one was theft, and we finished up with that one. So if you want to see more about that, please see the previous videos. Now this is the next category, which is illicit relations. So this is a pretty interesting, category, I guess you would say, and he has a lot to say about it. So I think it's important to know this too, because maybe a lot of people don't know this information or didn't realize that this is an issue. So he calls this Nikios in forbidden relationships, and this is I'm going to split this next category also in 2 because it's not super long, but I don't want the videos to go too long so that you can absorb the information, because he always has a lot of great things to say. So he says here, we will now speak about arayos, which is defined as illicit relations, as they too are among the sins that are coveted by people as mentioned above. And then he says, see note 2 there. I'm not going to go back to that, but that's what he says. And they are second only to theft in terms of their level of challenge, as indicated by the statement of the sages of blessed memory that I mentioned above, which is at the end of chapter 10 and also Baba Basra 165a, that most people stumble with regard to theft, and a minority of them with regard to illicit relationships. The commentary here says Ramchal does not mean that arayos are on a lower level than theft in terms of lust, for the Gemara in Chagiga 11b states clearly that the desire for illicit relations is stronger. Rather, he means that a person is less susceptible to committing an arayos-related offense than he is to committing a theft-related offense, for even though the desire for arayos is so great, the lines separating the permitted and forbidden are more clear-cut, leaving less room for rationalization. The laws of theft, on the other hand, are often subtle and complex, creating, quote, gray areas that provide fertile ground for justifying forbidden behavior. Ramchal points out later in this chapter that strong desire, combined with the opportunity to rationalize, makes these sins especially hard to avoid. And it also says, see, Rav Cheskel Sarna's Iyunim and Matnas Halko or Mesillas. Now, I don't know if he mentions this about whether he's talking about male or female, but I think I would say, this is me saying it, that it could apply to both. So it doesn't mean it's usually the man. It's usually the men that are more prone to it, but it doesn't mean that a woman can't as well. And I'm just saying that, and I don't know if he'll mention that here in this area or not. Okay, so continuing on, and I didn't finish one other part from this comment. So in any case, although avoiding all forms of arayos is easier than avoiding theft, it is still a great challenge. Rambam Hilchos Yisrei Bia 22:18 writes that when the Israelites in the wilderness were instructed in the laws of arayos, they were so overwhelmed by what they saw as the difficulty of the task that they broke down and wept. Okay, now continuing on. So he says, accordingly, if one wishes to be completely cleansed, which means naki, as this chapter is about Nikios, of this sin, he too will need no small amount of effort to succeed. For the prohibition of arayos includes not only the forbidden act itself, but also anything associated with it. So I'm going to say that here, that when you think about that, so it's not just, the intimate act, but it's anything associated with it. So that's a lot. It can cover a lot of things. And, it's not easy for a lot of people. So I'm sure he's going to give suggestions what to do. Of course, watching your eyes, we all know about that, and different things that will prevent you from being caught up in this type of forbidden things. Okay, so that's just me saying it. Okay, so now we continue on. This expanded definition of arayos is anchored in an explicit verse in Leviticus or Vayikra 18:6. Any man shall not approach his close relative to uncover erva. So in Hebrew, it's lo tikruvu legalot erva. And the commentary here says, by warning us not to, quote, approach a relative to uncover erva, the verse forbids behavior that can result in forbidden intimacy quite apart from the act itself. Thus, the verse should be understood to mean do not approach them in a manner that could lead to uncovering erva. Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvos Lo Sa'aseh 353 and Hilchos Isurei Bia 21:1. And according to the Rambam, this prohibition on affectionate contact is biblical, meaning it's from the Torah, the Raisa. The Ramban, however, in Sefer HaMitzvos holds that the prohibition is rabbinic, which means D'Rabbanan, and the verse alludes to a law instituted by the sages. Okay, so continuing on, further proof that anything associated with an immoral act is prohibited. On this subject, the sages of blessed memory in Shemos Rabbah 16:2 recounted the following divine admonition. The Holy One, blessed is He, said to the Jewish people, do not say to yourself, since I am forbidden to have relations with the woman, I will at least hold her and not be guilty of sin, or I will hug her and not be guilty of sin, or I will kiss her and not be guilty of sin. In response, the Holy One, blessed is He, said, just as one who vows to be a Nazir, and thus not to drink wine, is also forbidden to consume fresh grapes and raisins, substances in which grapes have been steeped, and any derivatives of the grapevine. So it is regarding a woman who is not your wife. It is forbidden to touch her at all. That's a clear statement. And the Midrash, the commentary says, the Midrash bases this linkage of Arayos to a Nazir on the verse in Tehillim 128:3. Your wife is like a fruitful grapevine, and on the fact that the passage of Nazir stated in the Torah immediately after the passage of the Sota, which is the unfaithful wife, says see Bamidbar chapters 5-6. So that's very interesting. I never related that from Tehillim. Your wife's like a fruitful grapevine. So interesting how that relates to the Nazir. Very, very interesting. Okay, so now he continues on. The Midrash concludes, and anyone who touches a woman who is not his wife brings death upon himself, as it states in Mishlei 7:26. For she has felled many victims. Continuing on, Ramchal elaborates on the comparison to a Nazir. Observe how remarkable the message of this midrashic discourse is, in that it compares this prohibition of arayos to that of the Nazir, which is unique in that although the primary prohibition upon a Nazir is only against drinking wine, nevertheless the Torah also explicitly forbade him to consume anything related to wine. This was a lesson that the Torah taught the sages regarding how they should create a protective fence around the laws of the Torah. In Hebrew, that's a siyag Torah. Through the safeguards that they were empowered to create for the protection of the Torah laws. For the sages are to learn from the case of the Nazir to prohibit, for the sake of safeguarding the primary prohibition, anything that resembles it. So that's what I'm just saying, so that's what they use as a safeguard. Like anything else might cause him to, fall away and not do what he's supposed to do. So you don't want temptation. It's a temptation. So he continues on. It thus emerges that the Torah itself did regarding the mitzvah of Nazir what is delegated to the sages to do regarding all other mitzvot. In order for us to know that this creation of safeguards for the mitzvot is the will of the omnipresent, so that when he forbids any one of the other prohibitions in the Torah, he meaning Hashem, and does not specify that related acts are also prohibited, the unspecified should be derived from the specified, so that the sages should proceed to prohibit anything closely related to the explicitly prohibited act. The commentary here says, the sages' legal authority to forbid things that the Torah does not specify is actually derived from a different verse. In Hebrew, it's Ushamartim is Mishmarti, which means you shall safeguard my charge, from Vayikra 18:30, by which the sages were directed to enact statutes that would distance people from the biblical prohibition, Yevamos 21a. So what then is derived from the Nazir prototype? It is the principle that the Torah does not merely authorize the sages to enact safeguards, but actually desires that they do so. Thus, for each of its 365 negative commandments, the Torah spells out the primary prohibition and then relies upon the sages to enact whatever additional injunctions are necessary to safeguard the primary prohibition. It follows that although the Torah's prohibition is biblical law, and the safeguards have the force of rabbinic law, these safeguards should be regarded as integral parts of the mitzvah. This is evident from the Nazir prototype, in which the prohibitions against grape products safeguard the main prohibition against drinking wine. Yet the Torah incorporated these safeguards into its laws of the Nazir, making them inherent expressions of the Nazir's state. So too, in other areas of Torah law, the rabbinic safeguards are part and parcel of the parent prohibition. In the case of arayos, For example, the acts that the sages forbade in order to maintain a safe distance between men and women are actually considered forms of illicit behavior in their own right. Ramchal will soon articulate the idea explicitly with regard to lewd speech. This apparently is the, quote, remarkable point that the Ramchal sees in the Midrash. So this commentary really gives, good information. It's like, you have to create this fence around because, you may be tempted to go to do the actual thing that is prohibited by the Torah because you have these other things that you think are okay to do and they're not. Because one thing leads to the other. That's the whole issue with when you do things that are prohibited. So that's why the sages were given this allowance to create these fences, and you can't think that these fences are less important than the actual prohibition. So continuing on, he says, in keeping with this approach, the sages prohibited in this realm of illicit relations anything that is related to licentiousness or anything close to it, regardless of which bodily sense is involved. That is whether it involves action or sight or speech or hearing, and even if it involves only thought, as we shall see. So here's very, very interesting because there's so much involved here. So he's saying I'm saying this. So he's saying the action, the sight, the speech, the hearing, the thought. So many ways that you could be violating this. So now he continues on, having established that all the senses must be free of moral impropriety. Ramchal elaborates regarding each one, beginning with physical contact. And then I'm going to go through some of these. I'm not going to go through all of them. So then, like I said, I'm going to stop in about another page or so. So now he says, I will cite now for you proofs regarding all these secondary forms of erva from the words of the sages of blessed memory. So with regard to action, that is touching, hugging, and the like, their inappropriateness was already clarified in the Midrash discourse that we mentioned above. And there is no need to elaborate. So that's okay. Then that's what he says. So then that's done. Next, the prohibition involving sight. With regard to looking at inappropriate matters, the sages of blessed memory said in Baruch 61a, when the verse states Mishlei 11:21, from hand to hand he will not be spared from evil. So it teaches that anyone who counts out money from his hand into a woman's hand in order to gaze at her will not be exonerated from the judgment of Gehenna. Or it's pronounced, I think, Gehinom is how it's actually pronounced. It's the English, but that's how it's pronounced. Okay, so the commentary here says the quote, evil in the verse refers to Gehinom, which is occasionally called by that name, seen in Dharm 22a. The Gemara adds that such a person will not escape Gehinom, even if he is great in Torah and good deeds. This too is derived from the verse. And then the additional commentary says, while the punishment for gazing inappropriately is severe, the reward for not doing so is likewise very great. The Midrash states that one who is exposed to a forbidden sight and does not allow his eyes to feast on it will merit to behold Hashem's holy countenance. That's from Vayikra Rabbah 23:13. And it also says Sikariana de Igressa 1:107, where the Stipler Gaon stresses the importance of keeping this encouraging fact in mind. So always, I'm saying is always hearing that by not doing something you're not supposed to, meaning, by stopping yourself from looking at things you're not supposed to, you realize that it's going to bring you great merit. So that should be a good reason not to do it. Okay. So now he continues on. They also said in Shabbos 64a through b, why did the Jews of the generation, i.e. the commanders who led the war against the Midianites in the wilderness by Midbar chapter 31, need an atonement? Because their eyes feasted on lewdness during the conquest of Midian. So here the commentary says, toward the end of the Israel's sojourn in the wilderness, the evil prophet Bilam advised the Moabites and Midianites that the way to defeat the Israelites was to undermine their moral sanctity, whereupon the Midianite leaders sent their young women to tempt and seduce the Jewish men. This resulted in a plague that took 24,000 Jewish lives. Hashem then instructed Israel to wage a punitive war against the Midianites. After this successful campaign, the army commanders offered an atonement gift to the Mishkan, which is the tabernacle, from the jewelry that was taken from Midianite women. In the Talmudic passage quoted here, the sages explain what prompted this act of penance. I think I'm pronouncing that wrong. Okay. So during the course of the campaign, the Jewish warriors were exposed to a great deal of immodesty. And although none of them sinned actively, they were concerned about having derived illicit pleasure from gazing at the immoral Midianite woman. So there we go. Okay, so continue on. He says, the Gemara there continues, Rav Sheshes said, why did the Torah, describing the atonement gift that the soldiers brought, which is from verse 50, list the outer jewelry along with the intimate jewelry? To teach you that whoever gazes at the little finger of a woman, this is really amazing, right? It's like one who gazes at the most private place. So even the little finger, you gaze at the little finger of a woman you're not supposed to, serious business, serious crime, even that. Hard to believe, right? So the commentary here says, in the aforementioned passage, the Torah enumerates the individual items of the gift: gold vessels, anklet and bracelet, ring, the agil, which is a gold, it's for the upper part of the body. I'm not going to say the word, don't have to say it. And the kumaz, which is an ornament that covers the woman's private area. Although these details do not seem crucial to the narrative, the Torah records them because they indicate why the commanders brought the gift: to atone for sins associated with such intimate ornaments as the agil and the kumaz. But why, as the Gemara quoted here, did the Torah also name the articles of outer jewelry that they gave, such as rings? To teach that gazing at a woman's finger is tantamount to gazing at her private parts. The Rambam qualifies this law, stating that it is forbidden to gaze at a woman's finger only if one's intention is to derive pleasure from it. That's from Hilchos Isurei Bia 21:2. That is true, however, only because her finger is normally exposed. As for parts of her body that are normally covered, a man may not look at them even without any thought of enjoyment. Mishnah Berurah 75:7. So that's pretty serious stuff too. Okay, and just to finish up one more little thing here. So, and they said further in Avodah Zarah 20a. The verse states in Devarim 23:10, you shall beware of any evil thing, i.e. any evil thought, which teaches that a man may not gaze at a beautiful woman even if she is unmarried, or at a married woman even if she is unattractive. And the commentary here says the sages distinguished between married and unmarried women because cohabiting with a married woman is far more severe, since it is punishable by kares or capital punishment. Thus, even if a married woman is unattractive, and there is little concern that gazing at her will cause lewd thoughts, her married status necessitates extra care. That's from Or HaMesillas. Nowadays, this distinction does not apply, and the prohibition of gazing pertains even to an unattractive woman who is unmarried. For the reason, see Mishnah Berurah 75:17. And then the Rabbeinu Yonah writes in Igeres HaTshuva that a woman who behaves provocatively and causes men to stumble will share in their punishment. So I'm going to stop here, and then we'll continue on BeEzrat Hashem the next time with the more other areas. It's like speaking, hearing, and then a few other things to close up this discussion. So this is really some important information. You know, maybe everyone doesn't know that this is an issue, or they don't think it's an issue, but it definitely, everyone has to be aware of this. I think it applies to both men and women, even though he doesn't state that. So, and I hope and pray that we will all merit to live and see the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days and the rebuilding of our final and everlasting Beit HaMikdash. Amen, and thanks for watching.